Kenny, you are on our strategic plan advisory committee, so you're working alongside board members, you're working alongside staff members and our faculty. Of course, you've been doing a lot of remote work here for CMCB, so you're seeing all of the data, and you're still, of course, engaging in your flute program as well. So you're getting all these different inputs from CMCB. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you are learning, from the strategic plan side, which I'm so glad you're in, but also some of these other things as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah. Um, so I'm part of the strategic advisory committee. Um, so I've been able to listen to multiple different stakeholders of CMCB, and their insight as to how to make CMCB a more like diverse, equitable, and inclusive place. Um, so even though just listening and participating in like 2 meetings, I've been able to gain a better understanding of CMCB's like future and the important work that CMB is striving to achieve. So I've also been able to participate and just give my thoughts onto like the different aspects of the plan. Um, and it's just very helpful in learning more about the future and what CMCB has to offer. Um, I also work at CMCB, so I've just gained a lot of insight as to the different components that makes the music school successful. Um, I've been part of CMC for 8 years, and every week I go to work, I learn something new. So that's the most fun aspect of that. Um, and lastly, I've also been able to work closely with all the CMC staff and just listening to what they think about like the musical school aspect, and just learning from them. So those have been really insightful. And yeah.
Thank you. And Kenny is a whiz at gathering and processing data, from what I hear. um, so that's really great. No, thank you all. Those are some really great, really great, just an entry point. And just again, for those of you who are listening, and you can hear it from the way that they're responding. These are young people who get it, and it wasn't one of those things where we really just selected from our student body to give them an opportunity and to start to create these pathways into music and into the arts for all of them. And so I'd love to hear from each of you and just a little bit about what it's been like as you have been growing, and what do you think about as you think about your future in the arts? I know some of you are performers. I know Deena, you may go to another career completely, but I'm hoping that arts will continue to be part of your life. So as you're thinking about your future, can you tell me a little bit about how the arts you believe, how you think the arts are going to play a role in your future? Why don't we start with JeanCaleb?
I think the arts, well, obviously I want to go to college for viola performance. Well, probably something around that, but I don't know exactly yet. But um, yeah, I think music will definitely be a part of my future, just by like performing and just being in the music world. Because I know the music world is definitely small, but it's definitely like there's a lot of people anyways. So yeah, I think music will be a big part of my life even after college, and um even like later on in my adulthood. So and music has always been a part of my life since I was young. So yeah, I don't think anything's gonna change with that.
Deena?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that like was I started thinking about like after the mentorship program was about how like your relationship with music and like really anything like career related can like always be changing and evolving. But right now, what I'm thinking is that so I'm studying physics and psychology um, in college. So my plan as of now is to try to do something um, in like acoustics or like psychophysics, like the perception of sound and something related to that. Just because I would love to do something that's more like STEM related, but still has a lot of grounding in like music and like my just like fascination with that. And then also I just want to keep like performing, busking, like recording, working on that. And if that like to what degree that will be my main career, who knows, but I think that that's always going to be a part of what I'm doing.
Thank you, Kenny.
So I hope to continue pursuing music in some sort of form. Um, I definitely hope to continue being part of like an orchestra and an ensemble, because I've met some of my closest friends through the CMCB orchestra, and although um, they don't partake in it anymore, like I still keep in touch and contact with them. So I definitely hope that I'll be able to continue partaking in any sort of like chamber ensemble or something like that. Um, in terms of like pursuing like a musical career, it's been a thought of mine, but I also potentially have other career interests. But I definitely hold music very important to me, and so I'd definitely love to continue to pursue music in some sort of form.
Lemmy?
Yeah, yeah. I think music.
Relax.
I think music is just like I just feel like I've been doing music for so long that it's like I feel like I can't not do it. You know, it's like I feel like I've had a few different jobs. And it's like if they're not really music related, I just feel like I just like don't even care about it. So it's like what. I feel like I do I definitely would love to have a career in performance, but just like from like through the mentorship program and like curating events, I realize that like every time I curate an event and it like goes pretty well, even if I don't get a thank you, I'm still like it still feels like really satisfying, almost like pretty much the same way how you feel after a good performance. And I'm just like, wow, that's like you don't have to be music like be playing all the time. And I think that's like very reassuring. 'Cause, sometimes I don't want to play. I think we all go through that. And it's like also it's like if I can't use my hands anymore, it's like I can still get involved. I think that's a really nice part about music. It's like even if you're like not on the stage, you can still be like super heavily involved in just like every aspect of it. So I think that's.
No, it's great. Thank you all. These were. I'm going to open it up to the audience for a few questions now because I want to be respectful of you. You probably have to get warmed up for your show, but I want to open it up to, and Jeff, you let me know if there are any questions in the chat, and if anyone has any questions for our young people here, I want to open it up to you before I ask any more questions on my end. So I want to make sure there's room for those who are in the room. This question came from a CMCB board member. Thank you, Sandy. Her question was around the learner-centered component of where CMCB is going. And her question was, are you experiencing that in your time here? And for those of you who might be alums, were there some things that you did and did not experience in your time here at CMCB as it related to the learner-centered training? And if so, what were those things? And if there were some things things you did experience, what were those things, and things you didn't experience? What were some things you would have liked to have experienced that you might have viewed as being more learner-centered on your side? Actually, I'm going to throw this one to Deena first, and then everyone else can chime in because I know you've talked a few times about your experience here and some of the things that you did artistically and whether or not you were doing them, at CMCB or actually outside of CMCB. So why don't you take this one first?
Yeah. So for my time at CMCB, like I started like my involvement like in the string department and like taking theory classes and stuff like that was mostly classical for violin. And then sort of outside of CMCB, I started playing the electric violin and like experimenting with different types of music in that way. And what I thought was really cool about CMCB while I was still in high school was that they had, like, for example, the Young Composers Festival, which happens every year in like February or something, was a really good place for them to kind of open the floor and like invite a lot of guests in and just kind of explore different sides of music that we hadn't really don't normally talk about, at least in like the classical sense of like violin. And so I performed at that, like electric violin, and then also I was able to perform my like electric violin, and like I use a loop pedal and do arrangements with that. And I was able to do that at like a few different events. Like I know I did it for a Fiddle Fest one year. And then they had, I think it was kids from a program in some school that CMCB had, and they kind of came together and did a concert for each other. And then I performed electric violin for those kids, and they kind of talked about it. And like I also integrated it with when I was a counselor at summer music, and just kind of the kids would ask me questions about it, and I could like explain things to them, and that was really cool. So in that way, I think CMCB was very like open to like artistic explorations outside of like the norm, I guess, and like wanted me to like share that with other students, and was really creating like a space for that. And I also want to say, like, as part of the mentorship thing that I did last year, I think that was also very like centered around what we wanted to do. So every week we would come in and like ask questions, and we would like Nicole and really wanted to know like what in particular we had questions about. And a lot of the times when you're thinking about like your career and your future, it's a lot of unknowns, and you don't know. You're like, oh, this is a stupid question, or like, I just don't even know what I don't know. So where to begin? And the mentorship program was like, I felt like such a space where like there are no stupid questions, and like anything that you could possibly wonder about, like let's have that conversation. And I thought that was very meaningful to me, where a lot of like career conversations are very centered around like, let me just tell you what it is, and it's kind of vague and they don't really explain the nitty gritty of it. But yeah, so that was really interesting for me.
Before we turn it over, did you, when you were doing the electric violin, did you engage in electric violin as like a regular part of your lessons, or was that really something you did outside of CMCB as your own kind of separate artistic practice?
That was mostly outside of CMCB, just like exploring on my own.
Yeah, and that's still the thing that you're doing the majority of now, is doing the electric violin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in an orchestra here at Columbia, and we play like classical repertoire. So I'm still maintaining it in that way, but outside of that, mostly the electric violin. Yeah.
Right. And Sandra, to your question, someone like Deena now, as we were thinking about it, we would maybe try to find ways to which she could actually engage in that educationally at CMCB, not just from a presentation perspective. So if someone like Deena were very interested and excited about electric violin, I would then start having conversations with folks internally about, well, how do we find opportunities for someone like her to actually engage in that artistic practice educationally via CMCB, rather than a component of her artistic practice being separate, and then she's doing this other thing at CMCB. So that's because clearly that's an area of interest and an artistic practice that Deena is interested in. And so, kind of the learner-centered perspective would say, well, how do we find room for both of them, not only from a presentation perspective, but also educationally as a learner? How does she engage in that practice as well at CMCB? Does anyone else want to respond to that? Lemmy, did you have a thought?
I'm still formulating. Well, I think that's a very interesting question, a learner center, because just depending, I feel like it also just depends on who the teacher is. I think that's like really important. Why it's important to get good teachers and not just good musicians. Because I know, I won't say who, but I go to NEC right now, and there are, they have like, they say, we have like some of the best faculty, like the best musicians in the world. But what unfortunately happens is, you have people who are like in their 70s who've been teaching the same way their entire lives. So it gets kind of hairy if you want to like go outside that little, that current. But then also on the other side there, it's like, well, this is how, if you're looking at it from a classical standpoint, or even like from like a traditional in block improvisational music, there's like certain things that are like, this is part of the history, this is why we do it, and the way you see it might be disrespectful to them. So there's also that. But I will say, at least at my time at CMCB, I've always had a really, because I studied with Jeffrey Shamu for my entire time here, and I feel like he knew what I wanted to do, and he would just like be like, okay, you want to get here, here are the steps to take it. You can go this way, or you can kind of go this way with it. And I think just like, if we want to have like, a learning centered, or like a student learning kind of, sorry, I'm like losing my words. But if you want to curate to the students, I think we still have to have faculty members who understand, how to take different approaches to things, and just like doing, because one of my faculty members at NEC, I'm very grateful to him, John McNeil. I was struggling with this one thing, and I was like, you know what? I'm just like not even gonna learn that, because like it's not like vital. But he like took a totally different like approach to it. Like we got to this same spot. So I think it's really important that teachers understand how to like get to different points with students in different manners, because we all learn differently. We all hear music differently. We all perceive it differently. So I think it's really important that we just try to like connect with our students on a personal level to like see what their interests are, and just try to go from there.
Yeah, and I think to your point, oftentimes we can still pedagogically have a very cookie cutter approach to teaching music, where it's like, this is the way I learned how to do it, so you will learn this way. And to your point, which I thought was a really an important point I want to lift up, which is that we all learn differently, right? And so in a learner-centered perspective, you would begin with, how does the student learn? So like, what do you want to learn? How do you learn? Which is kind of beginning in which sometimes it's a very deficit frame. It's like when you start off at school, everyone starts with 100, and then you start doing worse, and now you've got an 80. And like, an 80 is good, but you feel terrible because like, I started off with 100 and now I've got an 80, which is very different than we're all starting together from zero, and let's move to where we're going to move to together. And I think that our educational practice doesn't allow for that. It actually in many ways pushes against that. It's like, well, this is the way that it's supposed to be, and the way it's supposed to sound, and the way that it's supposed to look. And if it doesn't look that way, it's an 80. Right? And so again, this practice, kind of provides this space for this kind of collaborative, bi-directional relationship with a teacher and a student, like the ones that you were talking about. Is there any other questions from the chat? Yeah, the question was, as Black men going into the field of classical music, how do you think that you will navigate being in the field? JeanCaleb, we actually talked about this a little bit, and you spoke a little bit about this in the video for the luncheon. And so, as the Black man who is, I'll respond to it as well as someone who was a Black classical musician. But I'll start with you, being learner-centered. I'll start with you, JeanCaleb. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, this is a great question. Thank you to whoever asked it. But yeah, I think honestly, I know from experience and from like my siblings and my parents and just my community, that being Black means you have to work 10 times harder for some of the same opportunities as like everybody else. And especially in the classical music industry, where it's mainly white people and white men, it's extremely hard to like stand out, I guess. And I think honestly, when I get to that point, when I get to that point, I think I'll just have to let like my music and my technique and basically just speak for me, I guess, if that makes sense. So just like removing the whole like race thing and just like making it about the music specifically. But yeah, I'm curious to hear Napoleon's thoughts on this because I remember our conversation about this back in November, I think. So
Yeah. I tell people all the time, especially I especially talk to white people about this and try to tell them imagine what it's like, what it feels like to walk in a room with all black people and you're the only white person. Like imagine that feeling, like sit in it for a minute, right? Do you recognize that you're white when you're in a room of all black people? Well, yeah. That's how black classical musicians feel all the time. That's a feeling that is normalized when you are a black classical musician. So it's this feeling that you might feel in a very visceral way your first time, and maybe it happens to you once or twice a year, maybe depending on what you do. And it's something that someone experiences literally every day they go to work. Right? Like that is the experience. There's actually, I encourage you to look into it and sign on to it. There's actually a letter that came out from black orchestral musicians around the country that's making the rounds where they are all essentially making some demands on the orchestral field to say, hey, the field's got to do better. The field is saying that it wants to do better, but it has to actually show that it's doing better. So statements of solidarity aren't enough for those of us who are sitting in an orchestra. They're cute and all, but they don't change my experience in the orchestra. And so they're calling out boards, the rest of management. They're calling out, the artistic, the music itself, the repertoire that's being performed. They're essentially calling out the entire field because it is othering by its design. And so there are a whole group of folks who are calling that out. My own experience, I'll speak briefly on it, was very difficult. I really lost my own sense of my own identity as a black person, as a black man. I lost that because I was like, I'm just a bassoonist. And all that matters is how I play the bassoon. And so I have to kind of ignore who I am and my own cultural heritage in order for me to be accepted inside this field. It came a point in my own career once I had become successful enough where I was like, you know what? I reject that completely as a necessity. And so someone like a JeanCaleb, I would say, if you self-identify as being black, be black. Be black all the time. Be black, wherever you show up. And the places themselves have to learn how to stop being anti-black. Right, and so that's my mission now, is to this whole learner-centered and becoming more culturally inclusive, is so that a student like yourself never gets asked that question again.
I mean, even now, I'm one of the few black people in our department.
In jazz.
At NEC, yeah.
Word?
Yeah. It is what it is. But I think just like from being in those spaces where you're like the only black person, I think the only thing that I can and I'm still experiences. I'm still I'm 20, so I've been gone through the whole thing. I think my only advice for people who are experiencing that is, I guess, is to take care of yourself. I feel like, especially in the black community, we always hush mental health, and I think that's probably the most important thing. And because I feel the biggest thing in the back of your head, it's man, you're only here because you're black, and people might say that to you, but I feel the biggest person saying that is definitely gonna be you, because I know I've definitely been well, are you here because you earned it, or is it here because they have to hit the quota, diversity, but I think you have to just be I've worked hard my entire life. I've earned the right to be here just as much as anyone else. I'm black, and I'm proud of it, and I'm also playing classical music. So I think that's just one aspect of how you can kind of cope being with it, and just realize that there's other people who are going through the exact same thing as you are going through. So no matter how dang, this is really bad, you're just you know what, I'm doing this because I want to make a change, so other people can see me. And unfortunately, this is our cross we have to bear. But it's you're there, and then, you know, a little black kid's like, wow, I play flute. I see that guy playing flute. I think I can do it. And that is just one of the beauties of the whole experience. Because even though it's really bitter, there is like positivity at the end of it, which is, I found.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Thank you.
I wanted to add on to what I was saying earlier. I am at the NEC Prep Orchestra, the Youth Repertory Orchestra, and I'm like one of the only Black members in there. I think there's like one more, but I just think it's really interesting to notice these things at my young age and how like they don't really get better as I would like move into the higher orchestras in my life, like the Boston Symphony Orchestra or any symphony orchestras. So I just think as a whole industry, it needs to get better because there are definitely other Black students who are musicians who want to be in these orchestras, but they're not. And that needs to be fixed like now. So yeah.
I will say, you definitely sign on to that Black Orchestral Network. Those of you who are watching, and if you happen to catch this on YouTube later, please make sure you sign up and sign that petition. I think that they are putting together right now. And I will tell you, the reason I became a musician was that so for someone like JeanCaleb could say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a Black classical musician. Like, where do I go? What do I do?" Maybe Lacolian knows. Right? Maybe he would know. And you have no idea how happy I was when you sent that, because you sent it to a bunch of people, right? You sounded a hootie hoo if ever I've heard one, right? I mean, you sent out a bat signal, and I appreciated it. I thought that was a brilliant thing to do. Was there another question, Jess? Maybe Kenny, do you want to start with that one? The question was, has your internship encouraged you to go into other careers in music?
Yeah. So I've been working at CMCB, and that's definitely inspired me to pursue careers in musical, like administratively. The thought of working in the administrative work didn't really appeal to me since I didn't see the impact that I was having. But working at CMCB with Morgan and with Samantha, along with my fellow student interns, I've definitely seen the impact of my work, and that just continues to inspire me to pursue the administrative aspect of music. On the other hand, the professional level, the performance level of music. Um, I've also had the privilege to have like teachers who are very encouraging for me to pursue music in the future. Um, and so that's also been inspiring to continue music in the future. But my aspirations is to continue with chamber ensembles and incorporating music to my other interests. So it's just interesting to learn that music can be incorporated in so many different ways. So working at CMCB has definitely inspired me.
Speaking of impact, Kenny has been doing a lot of work helping CMCB understand what its impact is with metrics. So he has been gathering a lot of data for CMCB to help us, again, understand what our impact has been. And he's been doing a great job at that. So when you talk about wanting to have an impact on the administrative side, I mean, you're literally measuring impact at CMCB. So that is some impactful work in and of itself. JeanCaleb, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Before I started my student worker job at CMCB, I really did not know anything about arts administration or what that world was, because I was exposed to just the performance side of music. And I remember a conversation I had with a staff member at CMCB, Zach Sheets, and he was talking about how when he graduated high school, he was talking to some of his other classmates, and they were saying how like they would be in these orchestras and all this, and he was saying how he would be working in arts administration, and they kind of looked at him crazy, like you had so much potential with your flute, and you're just gonna waste it doing arts administration, and I think that's completely wrong. And I think there's definitely a balance with being a performer and doing art administration, and there can definitely be both. So yeah. I'm definitely grateful to have that exposure to the other side of music.
Thank you. One of the things from JeanCaleb, I think it was you, if you're here on Saturdays, you don't actually get to see any of the administrative offices, any of the administrative staff, because they're a Monday through Friday group. And so JeanCaleb came in, like, one of his first days, he was like, who are all these people? What do all these people do? I had no idea all these people did things here, which that was a great story that someone told me. I don't, you might have said that in confidence, but someone told me anyway. But I thought it was a great story. Jess, last question?
Yes, the last question is actually for Lemuel and Deena. So you're both at different universities. You know, Lemuel, you are at a conservatory, and Deena's at a liberal arts school. Do you think that by going to one or the other, you know, for each of you, you could speak on this? Do you feel like there's something that like you're missing out in terms of your musical experience by being at one versus the other one?
Wait, could you repeat that?
The question, sorry for those of you who might not have heard it. The question for Lemmy was, being at a conservatory, is there something that you feel like you're missing out on, you know, by not being at a liberal arts school? And subsequently, the opposite was for Deena. Deena, you're at a liberal arts school. Is there something that you might feel like you might be missing out on by not being at a conservatory?
I wouldn't say. Well, I feel like a lot of stuff at I guess a normal university I don't really miss. I guess the only thing is the social aspect of having to like interact with like, because NEC is like, it's like 1,000 people, and I feel like having to interact with like 10,000 people is a lot more difficult to do than when it's a lot smaller socially. So I think that's the only thing I can think of. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Deena?
For me, I never really considered strongly going to a music school. I knew that I always wanted to kind of see what else was out there, and then maybe have music kind of be like on the side and a way that I could integrate it with. But one of the things that I think like if I could change anything, just like at a music school, like they deliberately put you in spaces where you can like make connections and meet other musicians in a way that's not just doesn't happen like at a big school where like not everyone is a musician, and a lot of people like might be doing like classical music or might be whatever, but it's a lot harder to kind of have a centralized like here are a lot of other people that share this specific interest. But for me, I kind of always knew that was the path that I wanted to go on. So
Yeah, so I can definitely hear a lot of the social differences, the kind of the fact that you don't have the same type of social opportunities on either side. So for myself, I went to a large school, University of Texas, welcome. And I also went to a conservatory, Manhattan School of Music. So I got a little bit of both, so I can totally relate to the things that you heard both say. UT had 50,000 students in it. It was like its own city. Did I do this already? Because I'm not sure if I did. I feel like I did. Maybe I did. Okay, maybe I did. So in closing, no. In closing, thank you to our panelists. Can we give them a round of applause? The panelists are great. You all did a really, really great job, and to those of you who are watching, this is basically what we mean. When we're talking about learner-centered and being able to hear what our students have to say and having that play a role in what we're building and creating and amplifying, this is what we mean. This is what it looks like. There's this idea that our students are empty vessels, and these brilliant teachers, they pour their knowledge into these empty vessels, and the truth is, these folks are full. They're full of knowledge, they're full of information that they can share with us, and so it's really on our side to learn how to hear them better, and to be guides and to move alongside them rather than feeling like we're pulling a young person along towards a preset destination that we have decided. And so again, this is when we were talking about learner-centered, it's actually taking what these folks have said here and amplifying it and making sure that everyone has an opportunity so that, you know, Lemmy's experience and someone like Deena's experience, so someone like Deena can play electric violin here at CMCB while also playing classical violin, while also doing a whole manner of other things, where you can engage in classical trumpet and jazz trumpet and have all these opportunities here at CMCB. That's really what we're talking about. So this is what a learner-centered place could look like. I can't say what it's going to look like because by its nature, it will be agile, it will move based on the learner. But this is what something like that could look like. And I'm glad that we started our first panel discussion with our young people, because the next one will be with faculty. And they will be sharing with us how they think about some of these things as well. But again, thank you all for coming. Again, thanks to our panelists, thanks to those of you who are here in person. And please stick around. We have a great performance coming up with our alum and his group. So please stick around, and we definitely look forward to continuing the conversation with you as part of our community conversations. Thanks, everyone.